She was efficient, quiet, never caused trouble. But some people don't know when they've peaked. I gave her a gift card for Christmas, $25. Standard. No one else complained. And yet 2 weeks later, she quits. Says she's found something better. In our industry, I don't think so. So I called legal right in front of her. She froze. I needed her to understand. You don't just walk away from me. Not with what's mine. She thought I was being harsh, but I was just getting started.
I remember the click of the speakerphone, the way his finger hovered over the button, like he enjoyed it. The silence before the legal team answered. The grin he gave me while I sat there. He thought he was making a statement, but what he didn't realize was that I had already made mine. Weeks before that meeting, I had begun preparing, not just to leave, but to leave clean. I trained my replacement, documented every workflow, made sure the department would run without me, because I wanted my exit to be silent, but irreversible. It all started with a beige envelope. No note, no signature, just a generic Happy Holidays, and a $25 AMC gift card. There isn't an AMC theater in my state. I had just finished my second year managing his entire book of business. He earned $1.5 million in commissions, thanks to my work. I earned $45,000 a year. That gift wasn't an oversight, it was a message. You don't matter. And he was right, at least to him. I wasn't a person, I was a function, a tool, useful, disposable. That was the moment I stopped seeing a future there. So when I found a company that offered me more growth, more respect, I said yes. And I told him, respectfully, professionally. I expected him to nod, maybe say good luck. Instead, he dialed legal, put them on speaker. They told me I couldn't work in the industry for a year, not even in a janitorial role. I didn't flinch, I didn't answer their questions. I just sat there, watching him watch me, waiting for me to panic. But I didn't panic, because I had already won. And the moment I walked out of that office, his downfall began. The call with legal lasted 5 minutes. They spoke in clipped, rehearsed phrases, like they'd done this before, because they had. They quoted the non-compete clause from my contract, paragraph 12, subsection B. They told me I couldn't work in the same industry for 12 months, not even in a support role, as they called it, not in sales, not in logistics, not even at the front desk. You understand, they said, this is a standard clause. I didn't respond. I just looked at him. The man who used to email me at 11 p.m. asking for last-minute reports. The man I protected in client meetings when he forgot names, confused shipments, and made promises we couldn't keep. The man who now sat across from me, arms folded, waiting for me to break. But I didn't break, because everything they were saying, it wasn't law, it was leverage. It wasn't about protecting the company, it was about punishing me for walking away. I stood up, thanked them for their time, and walked out of the office. My hands were steady, my voice hadn't cracked, but inside I was shaking, not from fear but from fury. Not because they tried to ruin me, but because they thought I wouldn't notice. They thought I was just some quiet little employee, grateful, obedient, powerless. Over the next few days, things escalated. The CLO began calling me directly, always from a private number, always unannounced. At first, I didn't answer. Then I picked up, once. Just to see what they'd say, he asked questions without asking. What exactly will you be doing at this new company? Will you be working directly with any former clients? You do understand this could affect your professional reputation? I told him nothing. I owed them nothing. And still he kept calling. Then they crossed the line. They contacted my new employer. At first it was subtle, an inquiry email to HR, a vague mention of contractual issues. Then it got louder, a phone call, a message to the CEO's assistant, and finally a direct voicemail to the CEO himself, accusing me of breaching a non-compete, hinting at legal action. I was sure this was it, that the new company would back away, that they'd decide I wasn't worth the trouble. But I had underestimated the one thing my old boss never taught me to believe in: good leadership. My new CEO called me into his office. He didn't ask me to explain. He didn't question my integrity. He handed me his phone and played the voicemail on speaker. I listened to every word, every veiled threat, every legal phrase carefully crafted to sound terrifying. Then he looked at me and said, "I've seen this before. They're bluffing." I blinked. "You're not concerned?" He smiled. "If they had a case, they'd file it. They wouldn't be leaving voicemails. And if they try, we'll fight back. I stand by you. That moment changed everything. Not just because I felt protected, but because I finally understood what real power looked like. It wasn't yelling in meetings or quoting contracts. It wasn't calling legal on speakerphone. It was silence, clarity, confidence. I walked out of his office with a new kind of calm, not just relieved, but focused. They had tried to scare me, to bury me in paperwork and fear. But they forgot something. You can't bury someone who already knows how to rebuild. And I wasn't just walking away from my old job. I was walking towards something better. I didn't celebrate that night. Not because I wasn't relieved, I was. But I knew the fight wasn't over. They hadn't filed anything, yet. But the calls, the pressure, the veiled threats, that wasn't random. They wanted me rattled. They wanted me scared enough to back off before I ever became a problem. That told me one thing: they knew what I was capable of, even if they'd never admitted it out loud. My first few weeks at the new company were quiet, too quiet, no legal letters, no new threats. But something lingered in the air, like they were watching, waiting. So I stayed under the radar. No social media updates, no press releases. I asked my CEO not to announce my role publicly. He agreed without hesitation. Behind the scenes, I got to work. My new position wasn't in sales. Technically, I wasn't even touching clients. But I was building something bigger than any single account. They brought me in to design a new operational framework, cleaner logistics, more efficient client onboarding, scalable systems. Everything my old company used to talk about but never actually implemented, because they were too busy chasing quarterly numbers. I had ideas, years' worth, things I'd been jotting down in notebooks, Google Docs, the margins of old contracts. Now, I finally had the authority and the budget to make them real, and the freedom to do it quietly. I worked in the shadows, built the team slowly, carefully, people I trusted, people who'd also left bad bosses, burned bridges, been overlooked. We weren't loud, we weren't flashy, but we were good, better than good. 6 months in, we launched our first pilot program, limited scope, select clients only, no advertising, no fanfare, but word travels fast in this industry, especially when clients start saying things like, "I've never seen onboarding this smooth," or "Why doesn't your old company work like this?" I didn't name names. I didn't have to. The results spoke for themselves. Then something unexpected happened. Clients started reaching out to me directly, not through public channels, not to flirt with NDA boundaries, just to say hello, to ask how I was doing, to thank me. Because they remembered me. They remembered the woman who answered late-night emails, solved emergency reroutes, fixed broken deliveries without making them feel like an inconvenience. I didn't poach, I didn't pitch, but people talk. And one day I got a message that made me stop cold. A senior rep from one of my old firm's top accounts reached out. No formal greeting, just, "We're shopping vendors." That was all it said. I didn't reply, not right away. Instead, I sent a short message to my CEO. "If a former client knocks, do we open the door?" His response came instantly. "Only if you want to answer it." That was the moment it shifted from quiet rebuilding to quiet revenge, but not the petty kind. I didn't want to destroy anyone. I just wanted to prove a point, that when you treat people like tools, you lose them. And when you treat them like leaders, they build things you can't stop. Within a month, we onboarded 3 former clients from my old firm, not because I asked, but because they came looking, because their needs weren't being met, because the company that replaced me with someone cheaper was now paying the price. I made sure every transition was smooth, professional, clean, no drama, no noise. But the message was clear. I was no longer the employee begging to be seen. I was the architect of the system they couldn't compete with. And they knew it. The week after we signed the 3rd client, I received a new email. From an old colleague still inside the firm, it was one sentence: "They're starting to panic. They're starting to panic." That message echoed in my head for days. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. If they were panicking, it meant they were watching. If they were watching, it meant I could control what they saw, so I gave them something to look at. I asked my team to pause outbound communication for a week. No new clients, no new proposals, just routine check-ins, scheduled updates, low visibility. I knew what the silence would look like from the outside, like momentum had stalled, like maybe I had overreached, and that's exactly what I wanted them to think. Because panic doesn't lead to strategy, it leads to mistakes. Sure enough, it didn't take long. 2 days into the radio silence, my old company posted a press release, a bold, bloated announcement about restructuring, streamlined logistics, and investments in innovation. It was filled with buzzwords and empty metrics, but I recognized the tone, desperate. They were trying to tell the market they were still in control, still dominant. And they were trying to tell me they weren't afraid, which meant they were terrified. Later that week, one of our new clients forwarded an internal memo they'd received. It was from my old firm, sent directly to multiple accounts. We understand recent market shifts have raised questions. We'd like to reaffirm our commitment to service excellence and remind all clients that poaching or solicitation of business under existing agreements is strictly prohibited. No names, no direct accusations, but everyone knew who they were talking about. They were drawing lines, and they were daring me to cross one. That was the moment I knew they weren't going to sue me. They were going to try and bait me, trap me into doing something they could finally call a violation. I almost smiled, because it meant I didn't need to attack them anymore. They were about to come for me. All I had to do was stay still and let them swing first, so I gave them a small opening. One of our new clients, technically still under a rolling contract with my old company, asked if we could expedite their onboarding. We said yes, quietly, legally. They terminated their old agreement before we touched a file. But I knew the timeline would look suspicious from the outside, just suspicious enough to spark the reaction I needed. 3 days later, I received a cease and desist letter. The subject line read, "Immediate action required, breach of contract allegations." It was worded like a threat, but it was full of holes. The dates didn't line up. The client's own termination notice had been filed 2 days before we began onboarding. There was no breach, not even close. But that wasn't the point. The point was pressure. They wanted to rattle me publicly, put something on paper, make noise. So I let them. I didn't respond. Not at first. I let the letter sit. Let it stew. Let the tension build. Meanwhile, my legal team prepared a full rebuttal, signed statements, time-stamped communications, a dossier of every detail they failed to check before firing the shot. 1 week later, we responded, not with a letter, with a press release, clear, calm, neutral in tone, but bulletproof in detail. We are aware of recent allegations regarding client transitions. All transfers have occurred in compliance with contractual agreements, and we remain committed to transparent, ethical practices. No names, no attacks, but the subtext was clear. We see you, and we're 10 steps ahead. They thought they could corner me, but they walked right into mine. The moment our press release went live, the silence broke. I expected the usual corporate dance, back-channel emails, maybe a legal reply dressed in polite language, but what I got was louder. The next morning, someone leaked the cease and desist letter, not from our side. The formatting, the metadata, the timing, it all traced back to someone inside their legal department. And just like that, it became public. Not the accusation, not the context. The full letter, with dates, with names, with contradictions. It spread fast. Industry blogs picked it up. Forums, LinkedIn posts from people I didn't even know. The commentary was brutal. This looks weak. Who greenlit this? Trying to scare ex-employees in 2020s? Good luck. What they thought would intimidate me only exposed their desperation, and for the first time they couldn't control the narrative. Internally they scrambled. I know this because former colleagues started messaging me, quietly, privately, some to apologize, some to say they always knew something was off. But most of them just wanted to know the same thing. What are you going to do next? I wasn't planning to escalate. I didn't need to, but they did it for me. 2 days after the leak, one of my former clients forwarded me a newsletter from my old company. It was a targeted email blast, thinly veiled, but unmistakable in its purpose. We take compliance seriously. Recent rumors involving client transitions are being investigated internally. They weren't addressing me by name, but they didn't have to. It was a warning shot to the industry. Except they forgot something. You don't shoot when your hands are dirty. We responded, not with another press release, but with documentation. We published a case study. No names, no callouts, just a detailed walkthrough of how we helped a recent client reduce shipping delays by 48% in under 2 months. It outlined the chaos they inherited, the inconsistent tracking, the billing errors, the supply chain gaps. It didn't say where that chaos came from, but everyone in the industry could connect the dots. Then something shifted. A journalist reached out, one who covered logistics and corporate workplace ethics. He had seen the leaked letter. He had spoken to other former employees. He wanted to talk. At first, I hesitated. I wasn't looking for a headline. But then he said something that changed my mind. "You're not the only one they've done this to." So we talked. I didn't trash them. I didn't dramatize. I just told the truth, how I carried the business for 2 years, how I trained my replacement, how they tried to silence me with vague legal threats instead of a thank you. He listened, asked good questions, took notes, and when the article came out 2 weeks later, it hit hard. The title was clean, direct. The Cost of Control, When Loyalty Becomes Liability in Corporate America. It wasn't about revenge, it was about culture, leadership, power, and in every paragraph their pattern became clear. The same tactics used on me had been used on others. The story exploded. Shares, comments, people tagging colleagues, people saying, "This happened to me too." Even some former clients posted it, subtly, cryptically, but enough for the message to spread. I didn't need to say a word. The industry was speaking for me. That week, my old company went into full damage control mode. Their VP of marketing posted a vague apology about employee experiences not always reflecting leadership values. They issued a statement about reevaluating internal policies, but it was too late. The story had reached the one place they couldn't control, their future hires. Because while companies can survive losing clients, they rarely survive losing their reputation. And this wasn't just about business anymore, it was about trust. And the moment they tried to weaponize fear against me, they lost every ounce of it. Hasn't done yet. I didn't follow the headlines obsessively, but I didn't have to. The ripples from the article moved fast. Within a week, 3 more former employees came forward with their own stories, some worse than mine. HR missteps, verbal threats, pressure to sign NDAs under duress. And suddenly the story wasn't about me anymore, it was about them. A company that once bragged about being a leadership-driven culture was now being picked apart by the very people who built it. Internally, things started to unravel. One of my old teammates reached out quietly. She didn't want to gossip, she just wanted to thank me. Then she dropped the sentence I'd been waiting for. "He's gone." She didn't need to say his name. I knew exactly who she meant. My former boss, the man who once told me I was lucky to be here, had been forced to resign. Officially, it was labeled a strategic realignment. Unofficially, he had become a liability, a name the company no longer wanted associated with theirs. But it didn't stop there. A few weeks later, industry chatter confirmed the bigger picture. Several major clients had quietly exited their contracts. Others refused to renew. Hiring froze, turnover spiked. Recruiters stopped calling them a growth engine and started using words like toxic and unstable. Their names still existed, but their reputation did not. I didn't celebrate, I didn't post cryptic messages, I didn't call anyone to say, "Told you so," because this was never about revenge. This was about balance, about what happens when you push too far and assume no one will push back. One afternoon, I passed by their old headquarters on the way to a client meeting. The logo was still there, but something was different. The parking lot looked empty. The front desk was dark, no movement behind the glass. It looked like a building waiting to be sold. I didn't stop. I didn't need to. That place had already taught me everything I needed to learn. Later that week, I got another message, this time from a former intern. She had followed the entire story online. She thanked me for showing that silence doesn't equal weakness. Her words stayed with me, because for a long time I had been silent, working overtime, keeping my head down, being the reliable one, the invisible one. But now I was something else entirely, visible, respected, free. Months passed, things settled, my name wasn't in the news anymore. The story moved on, as stories always do. But the effects lingered, clients remembered, employees remembered, and the industry had a new example of what happens when power is abused. One afternoon, I received an unexpected email. It was from a local university's business department. They were hosting a leadership seminar focused on ethics, employee retention, and culture. They had read the article. They wanted me to speak. I almost declined. I wasn't a public speaker. I didn't crave attention. But something told me this wasn't about me. It was about what the story had become. So I said yes. The day of the seminar, I stood in front of a packed auditorium. Not as someone who had won, not as someone who had taken down a company, but as someone who had survived a system built to silence her and chose not to stay quiet. I spoke about leadership, about trust, about the quiet people in the room, the ones who fix everything behind the scenes and never ask for credit. I spoke about value and what happens when it's ignored. After the event, people came up to thank me, one by one, students, professionals, even executives. But there was one face I hadn't expected to see. He stood near the exit, alone, watching. Older now, more tired. It took me a moment to recognize him, my former boss. He didn't approach me, didn't say a word, but as our eyes met across the room, something shifted. For the first time, he wasn't smirking, wasn't posturing. He looked like a man who had finally realized that power built on fear doesn't last, that people remember how you treat them, long after they forget your titles. He turned and left without a word, and I let him go. That was the twist he never saw coming. I didn't need revenge. I had something better, a career I built on my own terms, a team I trusted, a company that valued me, and the quiet knowledge that I'd turned my worst moment into a foundation, not a scar. They gave me a $25 gift card, and they lost $1 million future. And if you've ever been made to feel small, disposable, or afraid to leave, remember this. You don't owe loyalty to those who weaponize it. You don't need to burn bridges to walk away. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply becoming impossible to ignore.